And we're live, episode 1. What is happening? What is this show? Why are we here? What is going on, Suchita? Why are we here? What is Think Fast?
We're here because we ran out of a new podcast to launch by ourselves independently. So we thought, chalo, might as well, give this a shot. Give this a shot. Bring to the Indians what the Westerns have been blessed with, thanks to Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. But yeah, guys,
Exactly.
welcome to Think Fast, our podcast on all things that are new, trending, interesting, and unique across startups, business, marketing, advertising, pop culture, and much, much, much more. How was your week, Varun?
My week's good. And I was telling someone about, someone messaged me, and I got a lot of messages saying, why are you doing one more podcast? What is this about? And I said that this is basically Suchita and I have been having these WhatsApp and Zoom catch-ups talking about everything that's happening in the space. And we finally decided to take that off the private chat and onto a podcast. Saying more people need to listen to this, the stuff we just yap about all the time. I feel that we talk about a lot of random stuff around the business space,
Yeah,
but
and
that's
exchange
what
notes.
my week's been. Yeah, and exchange notes, lots of notes. We
Yeah,
should do like a notes at the end of every episode. People can actually kind of take notes, but maybe that's a think notes. No, I'm not going to
you're
do
you're
that.
expecting too much from our listeners, but crazy week, man. Like it's
Yeah,
almost like everything and nothing has happened all in one week. I mean,
yeah,
everything from crypto ban and people losing it over Twitter, and
yeah, yeah,
I feel bad
and
for the Indian crypto guys.
yeah, I've heard a lot of people turn around and like there is literally an entire meltdown happening across Twitter, across multiple WhatsApp groups I'm a part of. There is like, okay, everyone's trying to figure out, okay, can I get a copy of the bill? Figure out what's happening there. I have not invested in crypto. I've been one of those people sitting and waiting and saying, okay, it's fine, I'll do it later. I'm a conservative investor in general. But on the
Neither
other
have
end, there's
I.
also been the meltdown of Paytm.
Oh man, Paytm meltdown has been its whole other story, and not just the meltdown of Paytm, the meltdown of VSS as well, which we'll get into in
Oh
just a
yeah.
bit, and the meltdown of Ashneet Grover, who got into this whole shtick
Oh my God.
for
Hmm.
some incredibly interesting reason, I suppose. Shark Tank is also launching. Wow, so much
Yes, I'm so
happening.
excited. I'm a huge fan.
I don't give a
I binge
shit.
watch Shark Tank all the time.
But I like the founders. I really, really like the Indian founders
Yeah,
on Shark
yeah,
Tank, at
yeah,
least a few of them. I've
yeah.
interacted with Ghazal, who's lovely. Vinita from Sugar Cosmetics is a fucking
Aman's a
rock
lot of
star.
fun.
So yes, and I love what they've built with both Lenskart, Piyush Bansal. He's super interesting as well. We've obviously got
So we're gonna run
Mr.
through that.
Bharat Pay. Sorry.
Yes, I said we're gonna run through that later on as well. We're gonna dig a
Yes.
little
Yep.
deeper
Yep.
into
Yep.
that part. And also importantly, Spider-Man's trailer came out. Have to talk to you about that. I will bring it up. I will not not let that happen. And also, Mr. Beast built Squid Game. He literally built it. I was watching the video. Some 7 hours had about 1.5 crore views. He spent
Holy
$3 million on the set.
By the way, is
I was
Beast
watching it.
Burger
A lot
still
of fun.
around? Would you know?
Pretty sure it is. I'm not sure, but I think it's
Hmm.
still around. I think it was one of the most successful ones in the creator space in that sense. But I'm sure it's pretty much
Yeah.
there. I'll have to check though. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things we're going to talk about. And what else are we going to do today?
We are going to kick off with our Think Fast segment. So, listeners, every single episode, Varun and I will ask each other rapid fire questions. Think of this as coffee with Karan rapid fire, when no one gets a hamper, but we get to applause at each other's hopeful jokes and insights or whatever else comes off of this. So, the way this
Yeah.
works, dear listeners, is Varun and I will basically throw phrases at each other, and
Yeah.
each of us has to basically come up with like the quickest, fastest response to that phrase. And
Yeah.
that is our Think Fast segment. So, Varun, are you ready to think fast?
But before we go to Think Fast, we have to go in for our first break. We have breaks. So we'll go in for a
Wow,
break and
guys.
we'll right back with the Think Fast segment in Think Fast.
Awesome, guys. We're back, and we're back with what's going to be the funnest section, I think, of this podcast. So, Varun, are you ready?
Yes,
Are
we're going
you
to think
all
fast
set?
in the Think Fast show.
So, Varun, are you ready? I'm gonna say
Yeah, I'm
something,
ready.
and you have to give me
Yeah,
like the first thing that comes to your mind.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
3, 2, 1, go. Oyo IPO.
Delayed. It's definitely going to be pushed ahead, especially after he saw what happened to Paytm. I'm pretty sure, looking at just how the business is, that he's going to hold on for a bit.
I don't
Um,
think it's gonna happen. You
no,
think it's gonna
do you
happen?
think it'll happen?
I
So
don't know,
delayed,
man. Mm,
delayed can be like I've delayed it for a year, I've delayed it for 6 months, or I've
got
delayed
it.
it to like maybe forever. So, but I think it's
Got it.
delayed for a
Yeah.
while for sure. It's going to this
Gotcha.
Paytm is going to spook a lot of these guys. My first one to you is, what do you think about the crypto bill?
Premature ejaculation is what I'll say because for the very simple reason, I think everyone's jumping the gun. Will I get cancelled for this, guys? It's a joke. It's a
We'll
joke.
only know. We'll only know
We'll
later.
only find out. No,
Yes.
but I don't know. Honestly, I haven't had a chance to really get my head into all that's happening in
Mm.
crypto in general and more specifically in
Yeah.
the Indian context. But yeah, I think
Mm.
everyone's jumping the gun. There's definitely going to be some regulation. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
chance in hell the space isn't going to be regulated, given that the government,
Exactly.
literally like cancelled our notes,
Mm.
to have control over all aspects of money inflow outflow in our country. So it's going to be regulated, but I think we're jumping the gun, and I think we
Yeah.
should just wait and watch. What about you?
I think what's also going to happen is that, it's like trying to regulate the internet, right? At some point, there'll be some things you can do, some things you can't do. There'll always be ways to get around it. It's simply like, you block stuff off, people use the VPN, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's going to be there. I think it's a little more serious here because it's money. And it's
Hmm.
obviously, and one of the whole things about any government is they want to hold that money, right? That's what they kind of control in many ways in currency and everything else. So there's going to be regulation. I don't know if they'll go as far as doing like as outlawing all private ones. I think there'll be a mechanism to say, you won't have a squid coin scenario happening, right? You will say, okay, you have to
Hmm.
go through this, get certified, only then you are a viable cryptocurrency in India, is what I feel they will do. But you never know
Hmm.
where this will end up.
Never know, never know. Your turn now, Varun. Diljit
Yes.
Dosanjh's lover,
It is by far the song I have played the most this year. I am telling you, when the whole
isn't it?
Spotify Wrapped happens this year, it will be the most played song for me this year. And I only heard it like 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, whatever. But I've just played it nonstop. I've gone through like 48 hours, 72 hours just playing that song. Although Jugnu has really picked up in my playlist these days. I've been trying to
Dude, but
practice
this guy is a
Badshah's moves.
legend.
Yes, he
I
is.
haven't
He's
seen, I
amazing.
haven't heard
His
Jugnu.
Instagram
Yeah,
lives are the
nobody's
best.
Diljit's
No, yeah, of course,
Instagram
Diljit's
lives.
Instagram lives. So he
Okay.
does his Instagram lives, which are the best.
Uh-huh.
There's this particular one I love. So he's very fluent, obviously, in Punjabi,
Uh-huh.
and reasonably bad with English. So he
Hmm.
has this girl who popped into his Instagram live. He pulls her into the chat. He's talking to her, and she doesn't know how to leave, and he doesn't know how to make her exit. So it's this whole sequence, and she doesn't know Punjabi or Hindi, and he can't communicate with her in a way she'll understand. It's online. You should watch. It's hilarious,
Oh
and
my
he's so
God.
funny, and he's being so sweet, and he's like he's doing the whole he's being a good boy
Peripona.
about it, but it is super.
Yeah.
It's super funny. He's
Yeah,
amazing.
I'm
He's so
glad
much
he
fun.
isn't obsessed with Kylie Jenner anymore. Or is he?
Thank
God
God for
knows.
that.
Tell us,
Little
Diljit.
creepiness
Tag
was
us and
happening.
tell us.
Also,
Sorry?
creepiness was happening. A little bit of
Yeah.
creepiness was happening even.
Too much
Okay,
creepiness.
my turn to ask you something. What do you think about creators becoming investors? Seeing a lot of that in the news
I
these
think
days.
it's I think it's great. I think it's a long time coming. Your bud, Mr. Beer Biceps,
Yes,
Ranjit, his
Ranveer,
name,
Ranveer
Ranveer, so
Alabadia.
close yet so far. Yes.
Yes.
He invested in something, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah. He just invested in the Nothing earphones, the
Oh,
audio
correct.
company,
Yes, yes,
the
yes.
Nothing
Yeah,
one. He put
yeah,
that in, and
yeah.
there was something else. I think there was a D2C personal care brand. I think he put in as well. So that's happening with
Mhm.
him. Internationally, of course, it's been a thing for a while,
It's
but
been
it's
on
slowly
fire.
happening a
Yeah.
lot more. I know Tanmay is very active in this space as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think it's awesome,
Tanmay is
man.
also
I
serious
think
a
it's
lot more.
Yeah, but I think it's needed because I think for so long the idea of how
Mm,
you make money, especially as a creator, has been limited
yeah,
to ads, right? Because such is the nature
yeah,
of these large platforms. But I think I think true empowerment of a creator is really helping them build some amount of longevity outside of just
yeah,
their name or their shelf life, right? And the only way to truly do that is to have ownership in things that can rise and grow. In fact, I tweeted about this recently, but if you look at the value of both Katrina Kaif and Alia Bhatt shares in Nykaa, not to compare them to creators that are obviously like giant
Yeah,
celebrities, but
yeah, yeah,
just that, right? Just the ability of like lending yourself to a brand, in the form of like cash or kind. It's incredible. What that's able
yeah,
to do, it's is absolutely incredible. And I also think it's high time creators got more involved in brand and business building. But
yeah.
I feel like that's going to be one of our deep dives further on.
No, no, for
Let me
sure.
get to my question for you, the last one.
Yes,
Are you ready,
yeah,
Varun?
yes, yes.
Elizabeth Holmes testifying in court as a part of the Theranos trial.
So here's, I think, unfortunately, what will happen to her, even though what she's done and what she's getting is totally what she deserves, I feel she'll get a lot more slack because she is a woman founder. And I feel as much as we try to change the narrative around that, that's what she'll play at, and that's what people will fall into. So it might actually end up helping her, whereas you should just treat her like a person who just did some really terrible things. But I think she's going to play that, and people will fall into that because people already are. They're already pushing that whole piece because when she spoke about her a co-founder having but kept her in the dark and she didn't know anything about it. And it's almost like you can see that this is planned, that it will go in that direction. I hate the term woman founder. I think we have founders, and
Same,
that's
same,
it.
same.
But
Yeah.
I think that's the trap that will happen.
And I think it's also kind of disgusting, no? That
Yeah.
just the whole like trajectory of this and how it's unfolded. I mean, it's horrible how you see folks like, especially in her case, use the female founder card when it's convenient.
Mm. Yeah.
She used it while building Theranos up. While she was on the cover of Forbes and this, that, and the other, and now it seems like she's very conveniently using having a
Yeah. She plays the
fiance,
whole
being a
female
young
Steve
mother.
Jobs thing, right?
Oh man, her voice, by the way,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like deeper than Amitabh's. That's really saying
It's
something.
hardcore. It's hardcore.
Yeah, but like, yeah, it's very like phlegmy. It's like,
Yeah.
like someone give her Vicks. It's ugh. But in any case, I can keep talking
Maybe that's the
about
medication she should have
Elizabeth.
come up with in the first place instead of doing what she was doing. Maybe that's the
This
test
her
she
blood.
needed.
Yeah, anti-phlegm.
And my last one to you is, what do you think about Mr. Beast spending $3 million on a Squid Game set and having 456 people play it on a YouTube video?
Dude, this guy has fuck you money evidently, and he's in a league and a class of his own. So you
Yeah,
do you, Mr. Beast, you do you.
yeah.
Spend your
But his
money,
theory, right?
spend your cash. Sorry.
His entire funder of creating content. His entire fund of creating content is he's saying he doesn't save anything. He spends 48 million a year on his content to just create it. He's
Holy
built this
shit.
hangar side studio. And it's super sweet. His mom handles the business and he does all this stuff. But his whole point is he doesn't want to make money. He's just saying whatever I make, I give out. He's never in like trying to make profit and all that stuff. Because he lives in small town America. He does that, but his game is just saying, because he goes out and gives people free money. He does like he plants like thousands of trees. He did that whole seas project. So he's in it for something so different. And I guess that's also what
Varun, I
makes
think
it
you're
so
naive.
exciting.
He's definitely holding crypto somewhere. That's the
Sure, he's
only
holding
reason
crypto.
he is giving away his cash for free, because he
Sure,
has
everybody's holding crypto
Bitcoin
somewhere.
lying somewhere. Not
Yes,
me,
I'm
man,
sure.
and definitely
That
not
I'm
you
sure.
either.
Maybe
Yes.
launch the
So
maybe Mr. Beast coin will come up at some point in time.
yes, and hopefully it will not get regulated by the never-ending saga of India's crypto bill and this, that, and the other. So, ladies and
Yes.
gents, that covers our Think Fast
Yes.
segment.
We were not fast
What's
at all,
next?
which is I think the whole point of it. We thought fast, but we spoke long.
Yeah,
That is
but
going
what's
to be
coming up
my line.
next? Oh my God, Varun, you and your line. Sorry, I already have like the line of this episode. I said
Yes.
premature ejaculation into a mic. I
Yes,
have
that's it.
won this
You got it
hands
there.
down. Mic drop.
Yes.
Mic drop.
And I will get Ranveer
Okay,
to come on
guys.
this show because you could not remember his name. I'm going to call Ranveer on this. I said, Ranveer, come in and guest. We're going to call him as guest on the
Randeep,
show.
Yamraj, Elizabeth.
Moving ahead swiftly. Um,
Yes.
let's run through a few other things that's been going on, right? Obviously, there's the entire thing happening around the D2C space. I know you have insight into that. there's a lot happening. We've got another unicorn in. I think we had one more right before we started recording this, but there's a unicorn now.
Dude,
6 months.
yep, 40th unicorn, and we're still counting, guys. The most recent unicorn is Upstocks, and another one
Mm,
announced, I think, earlier today was My Spinny, the second-hand car platform run
mm,
by super resilient Neeraj Singh, who's awesome. But I think we're going to talk about Mensa.
yeah.
Mensa, which was anointed the 37th unicorn of India. For those of you who are uninitiated, there's this massive enthusiasm about building the Thrasio for India. Those of you living under a rock, Thrasio essentially is this aggregator. I won't even call it a platform, but it's they
Yeah.
essentially aggregate the best selling products and brands that are on Amazon. They recently raised a round that I think was about $1 billion, that valued them at about $10 billion. So this space is heating up. Thrasio apparently is looking to make an entry into India, and you've had a couple of like Indian spin-offs, right? You've had Mensa, Global Bees, Ten
Mm,
Club, Even Flow, which sounds like a sanitary pad company, but
mm,
that's another topic for another day. But
mm,
you've got like a lot happening, in that space. I think what makes
yeah.
Mensa super interesting is no one really thought these guys would be able to break in so quickly, because
Yeah.
apparently they're the youngest company, about 6 months old,
Yeah.
already
6 months
raised
old. Yeah.
300 million. Yeah, already raised $300 million in equity and debt, and are already a part of the unicorn club. So, Vidi, what's your take, man? What's your take on Thrasio, House of Brands, or whatever the fuckity fuck it is that these guys are referring
So
to these companies
this
as?
house of this house of brands thing is interesting, right? And I mean, the question largely is, and if you look at MyGlam and how it's kind of scaled up in like the most massive way in recent years, like I at some point I didn't even realize MyGlam was this big till I suddenly realized it was this big, right? But I feel the interesting part is that especially with personal care, and this is maybe me speaking, I'm seeing this more and more where you go to one place to buy something and you want that same kind of like um I don't think vibe is the right word, but you're looking at this as an assortment, right? You're buying a bunch of things together, rather than. And I feel the worry is when you go to like a marketplace, like it's an Amazon to just buy. A lot of people like I feel this many times. Okay, I'm buying this from here. I'm not sure what else to kind of pick up. So it makes it simpler, is what I felt from a consumer standpoint. And I'm just taking a macro view here, right? Because the D2C space is something which I'm super interested in, but I have like very like consumer side and insight. But I would go to a roller player because I know I'm getting all the stuff curated together. I don't have to go looking for it with a specific brand in mind, because half the time I don't know in the normal D2C space where to find the right ones. And if this is all there together, I guess it gives them scale. But I think the tricky part is going to be, how do you stop yourself from becoming a shopper stop
Hmm.
for D2C, right? I think that's the question.
So obviously, I think the thing that makes Mensa, and not just Mensa, but just this whole concept of aggregators. So just a couple of things. House of Brands is not new by any barometer. If you look at any
No.
large company, whether it's Inditex or it's HUL, PNG, J&J, they're technically all
Yeah.
House of Brands, right?
Mm.
And essentially, the focus over there is how do you create a moat out of centralization. So, for
Yeah.
example, in Inditex's case, I was reading this really interesting article.
Explain moat
Um,
for people who don't know what moat is.
moat is basically like that, like in a castle, like the thing that's around a castle that makes sure like things can't get in. That was a terrible explanation. My hands did
Mm.
half the talking, but
But basically, how
it's
do you
it's
make
a,
sure
it's,
that
it's a,
everything stays within the family kinds?
exactly. And how do you make
Okay.
sure that, existing players or new players, they find it tough to really get in and break into the space that you're in? So I don't think House of Brands is a new strategy by any barometer, right? Most large companies over time become conglomerates and become House of Brands. I think this category in India is especially interesting, and actually specifically with respect to Mensa, right? I'm not even sure if I would compare it to Thrasio, because if you look at Thrasio, and evidently, ladies and gents, I have done a lot of research on this. But if you look at Thrasio and the type of companies that they acquire, Thrasio has acquired companies like Safe Rest, which is a mattress protection platform. What the hell that means, I don't know. White people problems.
Mm.
They acquired a camping equipment company called Wise Owl. They acquired a
Mm.
bedding company called Danjo Linens. But basically, their
Mm.
formula is, how do you standardize commodities, right? So
Yeah.
how do you pick up these things that are generally, commodity ish, and basically create discovery for these brands through, price, a lot of, consumer reviews, etc., etc. If you look at the
Yeah.
kind of brands that Mensa has acquired, because they've announced 12 brands that they've acquired, they've done a lot in women's fashion,
Yeah.
specifically kurtas, tunics, cords and the likes. They've done
Yeah.
men's t-shirts brands. They've done a jewelry brand and a bunch of, other things. But basically everything is generally in the fashion space. So
Yeah.
I actually think when you the questions that I would have, for example, for Mensa would be, question number one is why not acquire when you can build? If you look at the CEO of Mensa, who is,
Yeah.
obviously a gangster, Anand Narayanan, he used to obviously run Mintra.
Yeah.
He
Intra. Yeah.
and they launched Roadster. Roadster went from zero to $100 million brand in record time. I guess my question would be, why buy when you can build, right?
Yeah.
Why, acquire companies when you can use all of these, consumer insights that you've obviously got access to through
I
technology or
actually have
whatever
a thought
else,
on that.
which is.
I'm taking a weird analogy from how the ad business has worked over the years. Is that, if you look at the advertising business, all networks are built around just acquiring other agencies, right? I think
Hmm.
the primary thing is that you can scale faster if you already have two things. One is you have a set business, you don't have to do the R&D, you don't have to build the brand out, it's already there, and you also have people who are already running it. So you're
Hmm.
gonna take care of the two things. You take care of people invested in it, in terms of just building it, and also the brand. So it makes it easier to scale fast. Although now, if you look at the ad business, it's gone ulta, where you're trying to bring it down and simplify it. But in a weird way, that's how growth can happen much faster. And I guess that's one of the strong models. Right? You don't have to spend time in R&D. You don't have to spend time in anything. And more than anything else, you acquire a decent chunk of leadership talent who are driving those.
Yeah.
So again, I guess it's just scale is what I'm looking at it as.
For sure, and I think specifically in the case of categories like fashion or jewelry and the likes, right? If you look at, for instance, one of the world's best companies, Inditex, which runs Zara,
Mm,
Massimo, and six other brands, five other brands. Their moat really has been their supply chain, right? So Zara
yeah,
has this really interesting facility called the Cube, and
yeah,
it's this gigantic facility that apparently has monorails. It's like Hogwarts for fashionistas. But really, what Inditex has been able to do is really centralize this ability to identify consumer trends, identify
mm,
what's really going to break the internet next, and then marry it with really fast turnaround cycles that enable Zara stores to have fresh collections in record amount of time. So
yeah,
I think a question to ask is, I wonder how Mensa is really thinking of building out their moats, because
mm,
the way you problem solve for moats in fashion is very different from the way you problem solve for moats in, beauty,
yeah,
skincare, and the likes. Till now, a lot of their companies seem to be in this, general space of fashion, apparel, and the likes. But I wonder what happens when they start really moving out of these categories, right, and moving
yeah.
into categories which where the moat, where the real differentiation may not necessarily be
So true.
scale through supply chain or
Yeah,
scale through sharing knowledge amongst different types of retailers, fashion brands, etc. Lots to uncover there, but good on them,
yeah,
man. $300 million
yeah.
in record amount of time.
I
Apparently
guess
the
time will tell.
profitable. Yep, time will tell.
I,
Just
I also
like
want to, I just want to
I was
pick up from
gonna
this
jump
point.
in.
We're going to
You
see
go.
where this goes. We're going to see where this goes. Where is it going to roll up towards? Terrible analogy for the episode is over, and I will move swiftly ahead. Shark Tank India. I'm super excited about it. Let me tell you a few reasons why I'm excited. I'm a television person. I come from reality TV as the base of what I started off as. Right, so super excited whenever I see a format which I love, finding an Indian version or like a fresh format. Um, I've been a Shark Tank fan for a long time. What I love about it is it normalized, or rather made more popular, the non premium startup founder. Because
Hmm.
you always had this perception of it being this slightly more, you need to be either a tech company or you need something else to be a startup, and people kind of read it that way. It feels very differentiated from the normal world, like different from what, let's say, Bharat is like. I feel in America, Shark Tank made it something as a lot more aspirational, to be a
Yeah.
founder of any form of business. It doesn't have to be a startup. I think we also look at startups in the tech lens many times. And here, I think it's going to really do that. And I'm excited about the people they've got on, but I'm also
Yep.
excited about the fact that they're doing it as massy as possible, which is what this needs to be. There have been some older business channel versions of it, which I was super bored by. And I always was like, why is it so boring? I saw the trailer. Looks super fun. And what a great bunch to get together for it. What do you
Yeah,
think?
man. And I think it's exactly what you said, right? Where not to say that entrepreneurship hasn't become mainstream, because I remember,
Yeah.
5, 6 years ago, there was still apprehension around joining startups. And then, of course, you've seen the likes of everyone now grow, IPO, launch multiple, new and interesting business models. So, but I think you've hit the nail on the head where till now entrepreneurship has been very associated with like, tech, IIT, IIM types. And I
Yeah.
think really with Shark Tank, there's an opportunity to democratize it and make everyone feel like they can be a part of the larger story. So I love it, man. And given that there's no jobs being created in our country, high
Yeah.
time more people take up entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And also more than anything else, it's it's when you add as Indians, I feel when we add emotion into things and we make it a lot more entertaining in that sense, you start looking at it as saying, okay, maybe I can do that. It's like KBC, right? It's almost that equivalent for me. It can do that for business, and do that for any kind of business. I think that's really what's in my head. Like any kind of business suddenly becomes something you should aspire to do. Can be like on a big stage. So I'm super excited. I'm
And I
rooting for
also,
Aman
and I
to
love
be
the
the
point that
shark.
you no, but I also love the point that you made about like even representation, right? Like I was watching the trailer and it's really interesting to see, like older women, pitch their ideas, husband, wives pitch their ideas, brother, sisters pitch their ideas. And also the sharks, again, there's like diversity there. It's not a sausage fest, right?
Yeah,
You've got
yeah, yeah.
Vinita from Sugar, you've got Ghazal from Mama Earth, you've really got some like gangster people,
Also
up
got
there.
new
So
age startup founders. I think that's the most interesting part. They got all new age ones. They didn't. I didn't see
yeah.
anybody who felt like okay, they've done their thing and are now coming here to do time pass. Right? These are all people still running really great businesses.
Yeah, yeah, including Anupam Mittal.
Yes.
No, but fun stuff all around, man. I
Yeah.
am not a Shark Tank enthusiast, but I think yeah, just seeing the selection that they've got, I'm excited to
Yes.
see what they make of it.
Awesome.
Speaking of,
What else did you
yes,
have? What else did you
I
have on
have
your
a.
plate?
I obviously cannot end this segment slash conversation without talking about the Queens, Taylor Swift and Adele. The only one really
Yes.
missing in on all this action is Beyonce. Where the hell are you,
Yeah.
Beyonce?
But
Get
she
your
plays in
shit
a
together,
different
Beyonce.
planet. She's in a different world. Let's be honest.
I know, but she needs to like, get in with the rest of us and,
Yes.
like sing songs about things and like feelings and whatever. Beyonce is a whole other story. But shout out to Taylor Swift. By the way, guys, I'm a Taylor Swift stan. I have literally heard every single album a bajillion times. I am obsessed with Evermore and Folklore and the new like, regroup of Red. I heard the album top to bottom the second it launched. Just a
Yeah.
couple of data points for you listeners. iHeartRadio, which is America's largest radio station network, is only going to be playing Taylor's versions of her album
Hmm.
Red. In
So
fact,
so
Taylor's
hold on.
versions.
Let's take a step
uh,
back. Let's take a step back and explain what has happened here.
Okay, what has happened? Okay, got it. So
What has happened?
basically,
Take a step back. Explain what
Taylor
happened.
Swift and Taylor Swift specially has taken the music industry by storm. She's really reinvented a lot of rules, and a lot of the rules within the music industry are not artist or like creator friendly, right? So
Hmm.
she's really worked on making all of these, making just a construct of making music much more artist friendly. What Taylor Swift did was so basically she had an opportunity. No, she was not given the opportunity to buy masters of her previous albums, which
Yeah.
basically means any money made off of her previous albums goes to this guy who bought her masters who she didn't like. And basically there
Yeah.
was a Einstein moment where she said,
Yeah.
instead of this guy who I don't really like profiteering off of my music, what if I took my music in my own hands?
Yeah.
And what she basically did was she went back to the studio, and has basically been recording every single album of hers again and re-releasing it as name of album Taylor's
Yeah.
version. So there was Fearless,
Hmm.
Taylor's version, which again broke the internet. And the most recent album launched is Red, Taylor's
Yeah.
version, which has a lot of her like popular songs. You must have heard them, Varun. I know
which
you dance
which
them
also
every
which
single
also
night.
takes away the whole IP piece, right? I think the interesting part here is, for the longest time, and I know the internet has changed that to an extent. You always had record labels and people, like, the whole conversation about who makes the money of music. In an Indian context, the music networks, music labels actually run that part. They make the most amount of money from it. Artists
Yeah,
don't have as much rights. This kind of switches that, because we always said the internet will open that up, but if you talk to anyone who's make how much money do they make off streaming services, they make very little money, right? Most people make
peanuts.
money
Yeah,
of like live performances at max. And so the last 2 years have also been tough for people who couldn't do live performances. So
yeah.
I think this opens up a way to put it up, but also I don't know how it works from an IP standpoint. How does it work by saying, okay, I'm just going to do the songs again, but what does that do to the earlier rights? Because can't that, I'm sure he's suing her or something like that would be going on.
No, none of that is happening. So basically, this is what makes it really, really interesting. Where basically by contract, and I'll read out two quick things. So typically, 80% is the amount of streaming revenue a label can take, with 20% going to the artist. Versus when artists own their own masters, 80 to 95% of the revenue made actually goes in favor of the artist. So what this has really done is it's flipped the equation, like you said. And the other really interesting thing
Wow.
that's also happened is Universal Music Group, UMG, which is one of the largest sort of record labels. They've been doubling the amount of time in between an artist recording a song and then
Hmm.
having the ability to re-record it, because of the impact
Ah,
that this re-record has had on Taylor Swift. So I think at
that's
the end of the
interesting.
day, what's owned is a master, not really like the lyrics or the
Yeah,
song or any of that.
yeah,
So she
yeah,
does have the opportunity to re-record it, if she likes, which is literally exactly what she's done. And in
yeah.
doing that, and also I think the magic of Taylor Swift, right? And again, it goes back to what we'd spoken about earlier, creators. She truly is a creator. She knows how
Hmm.
to really get into bed with her fans, how
Yeah,
to interact with them, how to keep them engaged. In fact, we're seeing more artists becoming creators. I don't know if you saw, but Dua Lipa just launched Service
yeah,
95, which is going to be her
yeah,
own like media empire
yeah,
company of sorts, through which
yeah,
again she's going to have the opportunity to create a direct conversation with her fans. But just what Taylor Swift has done is incredible. And even Adele, 30, what
yeah.
an album. Have you heard it?
But you shared this tweet, and I hadn't seen the tweet till you sent it. I think what she's done for albums, because I have forgotten what it is like
For
to listen to an
vinyls,
album, because yeah,
records.
it
Dude,
comes in
she
shuffle.
disrupted the supply
Yeah.
chain. Basically,
Yes.
because of her, vinyls are like over. Like there aren't enough vinyl factories. And she
Vinyl.
basically got vinyl,
Did you just call it
vinyl.
vinyl?
It is vinyl, isn't it? Vinyl,
It's
vinyl.
vinyl.
Okay,
Vinyl.
I usually say
Okay.
records.
We're gonna let
Fine,
people comment.
God,
Is this
Varun.
vinyl or vinyl? If you're a listener, please, we'll give our Twitter handles at the end of this. You're gonna tell
Okay,
us if it's vinyl or vinyl.
if it's vinyl, this is going to be really embarrassing for me because I actually have a pretty kick-ass collection of vinyls, but I just call them records.
Yes. Records is
Whatever,
actually
guys.
the right way to call it.
Yes, basically
Yes.
vinyl, vinyl, vinyl. Yeah, so
Yes.
essentially Adele screwed up I mean, it's not her fault, but like the supply
Mm,
chain for vinyls went out the fucking window because she got 500,000 records pressed.
yeah.
And whatever. So there's this like whole thing happening in the record vinyl space because Adele has crushed it.
Yeah.
Another thing, and then we'll stop talking about this and get into our deep dive. I love what Adele said, right? And again, it just goes back to this whole thing of being counter narrative. Adele,
Yeah.
said something along the lines of artists today are basically making music for TikTok, right? So
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
artist is essentially thinking of how do I create a song that can become the next TikTok sensation. And
Yeah.
Adele said this really interesting thing saying, who's making music for the 30 to 40-year olds and who's
Yeah.
really getting into that, emotional life existency type space, which, all of the younger artists have kind of said tata bye bye to. And that's really
Yes.
where Adele has gone in. So just two badass ladies,
Yeah.
rethinking and
Yeah.
reimagining what
I think
music
it needs a
ownership.
change. I think the music industry has some really ancient systems which need to be disrupted. I think more power to them for doing this. It's amazing. And also the fact that she said that she made Spotify not put the shuffle on default when you play her album, or any only her album, or in
Money
general.
moves.
It's
I
amazing.
think in general, yeah, amazing.
Because that's true. I like to listen to an album like it's an album. I don't want it to shuffle automatically. But that's
I mean, I
I'm
don't give a
also an
shit
old
because all
person.
Adele songs are great.
And we're back with Think Fast. What do we talk about? What's our deep dive today? We have dived deep into most things today, but what is our deep dive today?
So we're going to be talking about Paytm's IPO, Nika's
Hmm.
stellar performance, and just generally our take on what's happening with this whole
Yeah.
listing space.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, poor MobiKwik is bearing the brunt of Paytm's
Oh man, and how?
not so lustrous filing. But yeah, man, Varun, give us like a TLDR. What is up?
So I'm also again like I'm going very bare bones, very macro wide on this one. Is that we haven't seen? I think the last I'd say year or so. I think ever since Zomato's thing has happened, you suddenly see what were always looked at as venture capital funded, that whole startup category, call them unicorn, call them everything else, suddenly moving to say, okay, I'll go public, because you've not seen that happen, right? What was generally stock market was always considered a certain kind of company. And we obviously saw how that changed in the US. And you look at the stocks in the US, and I have an uncle who bought Apple stock in the 80s. And he always has a
He's
big
rich.
grin on his face. I
Make
know he
sure
has a
he
grin on
writes
his
you
face.
into his
He bought Apple stock
inheritance.
in the 80s,
Varun, you better
right?
be in his inheritance plan, in his will.
I have my eye on the Apple stock there,
Make the
but
moves.
yeah. So I think this is that point for a lot of people. Be looking at this saying, okay, when these are companies who are almost aspirational for us, right? Because we've seen these kind of come up. It's also part of the newer system of how the internet has driven things. Like I remember when Zomato was coming out, I was really looking at how that was going. I was super excited for Nika, because I think it's a true disruptor in the way it has been built and scaled. Right, there's nothing like it. And also like just generally, I think from a company standpoint, there's something super exciting about it. I wasn't very excited about Paytm, to be honest. I've gotten to the let's look at the market, let's get into stocks, let's get into investments more recently, last few maybe 3-4 years. But something about it felt like it wasn't going to go right even before it came out. That's how I was feeling, because when you're looking at buying any company stock, you want clarity, right? And I wasn't seeing
Yeah,
enough clarity about what this was going to be. And I feel that's still a problem. I mean, just the comparison to Elon Musk doesn't help. But
at all.
what's the vision, which I still don't get?
And actually, it's interesting you say that because I was listening to this, interview that went kind of sideways in between a VSS, their CFO, and this gentleman called Prashant, who's a news anchor on CNBC.
Hmm.
And VSS really didn't do, it didn't really help his case when he basically alluded to the fact that, somewhere like the storytelling is missing and people aren't being able to understand the opportunity behind Paytm. But that's really the
Yeah,
thing, right? It's exactly what you said. There are multiple lines of businesses. And I was reading a couple of analyst reports, and a bunch of them stated that though they are in multiple business lines, they aren't a category leader in any
yeah,
except wallets. And
yeah,
unfortunately, wallets sort of got disrupted by UPI, right?
yeah, yeah,
Paytm also made a couple of moves in e-commerce with their launch of Paytm Mall. They got into ticketing across events. At some point, they were contesting with the Book My Show. Then they sort of
yeah,
started fighting with Make My Trip on the airlines OTA kind of
yeah,
piece.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think what's really happened is they made a bunch of bets which haven't
yeah,
necessarily panned out for them the way that they expected it to be, and their core
yeah,
business, which is still the highest driver of revenue for them,
yeah, yeah,
unfortunately is like a deteriorating business line, which is their
yeah, yeah.
wallets business.
I don't know why they didn't. And that's the question I have, right? I remember when we moved to digital payments largely, post demonetization and that period onwards, Paytm was a poster child, right? Like everybody,
Yeah.
everywhere you were, like every shop you went to, everywhere you were just using Paytm. It was almost like the Xerox, like you would say Xerox,
Yep.
the same way you would say Paytm. Um, Somewhere along the line, and I don't know how Google Pay became the default. And obviously now there are many more. Obviously Phone Pay kind of came in there and scaled as well. But I don't get why they missed that bus. It was one of the most obvious buses, which they owned the bus. They had the keys. They just didn't drive.
They had the
Very bad
keys, and
analogy.
it goes back to the same thing, which is, you can and let's be real, right? Like every large company has multiple business lines, but the
Mm.
winners for them in terms of, either profit pools or top line pools are usually like amply clear. The
Yeah.
problem over here is there's literally nothing else that's, gotten significant market share. So I was looking at the numbers, and payments is at 71% of their overall revenue, which is a low
Mm.
gross margin business, because, really what you do with like a 2
Yeah.
3%, a charge business. You've got financial products, which is at only 4% of their business. You've got commerce, which is at about 9% of their business. And then you've got, cloud, which is at 16% of their business. They could have actually made a killing. And again, not to say that they could have made a killing, because no one even knows where BNPL is going in India and Afterpay is
Mm.
going in India and this, that, and the other. But what they perhaps could have found leverage in is getting that banking license, getting into
Yeah.
lending, really thinking of financial products as a value
Yeah.
proposition to consumers, instead of trying to fight a, bloody battle with Flipkart, Amazon, and every other e-com player that's out there. That
Yeah.
said, you're totally right, man. I think irrespective of where this goes, and not that I'm an expert in stocks by any barometer,
Same here.
what VSS stands for is really something unique, right? And just his story, where he's come from. I mean, all of all of
Yeah,
that does
it's super
matter.
because that's what it's super inspirational. But end of the day, if I'm a person buying stocks, I'm looking at a few things. I'm either looking at a vision or I'm looking at profits.
Yeah,
When the vision isn't clear and profits are also like far away, I'm kind of concerned to buy. Which is why if you see the people who bought the stock as well, you didn't have high net worth people buying the Paytm stock. You had regular traders buying it, which is why it went down. And I also was checking the fact that I think also this perception that because the investors kind of sold in the secondary, and so almost the investors kind of went away, so a lot of the money was made by the investors. I don't know if it's
yep.
a perception problem or where that went wrong. It's something to maybe think about as to how they even structured it. Was that right for them? Did
Yeah.
that? I think they didn't do it right in many ways. Just like how they went towards the IPO.
Yeah, and again, maybe there is no like right or wrong way, because so much
Yeah,
of this is only just about coming together. But I think shout out to Nika, man,
yeah,
and I wanted,
I agree.
and I obviously wanted us to talk about our takeaways, right? Like
Yeah,
what do we really taken away in between this
yeah,
juxtaposition of Nika versus Paytm? But really look at Nika. Paytm has 22 million merchants.
mm,
Nika sells only 4,000 brands.
yeah,
As per their filing, 90% of their business is from their online sales. 40% of their revenue comes from tier one cities. They typically have 1.2 million average transacting users, while if you look at
yeah.
Paytm, that number is like northward of 50 million plus monthly transacting users, right? So just like
Yeah.
it's so interesting, because there is such a difference, and it's apples and oranges as businesses, but there's such a
Yeah, yeah.
distinction in like volume. But when you look at
Hmm.
value creation, the
Yeah.
value creation that Nika has been able to do for themselves, for their merchants, for their customers, and evidently for their shareholders,
Hmm.
seems to be, a class above pretty much everyone else. Because no one, I'm not even sure if the Nika folks thought they'd get to where they've gotten to, but I think the Nika story really is a story of
Again,
why
clarity, right?
value matters. Yeah.
It's clarity in terms of what's being built. And even then, if you realize, you remember that when after they first came out, the stock did drop as soon as people realized that they didn't have as much profit because they spent more on marketing, right?
Mhm.
Markets look at profit, and at the end of the day, so because, and I'm seeing this primarily because over the last, let's say, 3 to 4 years, there are two things which I've done from the investing, and before that I did nothing. Is that I invest in a certain amount of, let's say, stock, etc. I also invest into startups. When it's a startup, you're looking at it from the lens of saying, okay, is there a vision? What are you building? You look at future, you're looking at blue skies and what can be built there. And then later on look at business fundamentals and where that will go. When it's a stock, you want it to be something that has a certain amount of return, unless you like unless you're doing a Tesla or an Amazon, and like, and which is why I think he pitched this whole narrative of Elon Musk. I would have actually done Amazon and not done Musk in that sense, but um, only then can you hold it together. But even then, the problem is that you're not seeing one part of the business that is so robust. Like you said, if if the wallet was UPI, the narrative might have still been stronger. but because it's a wallet, that's where it becomes tricky for him.
Yep. And if I had to like think of takeaways, right? As an entrepreneur, I think for me, like one big takeaway was more users, more problems. And
Yeah,
I think specifically in the Indian context, there are very very few examples of people who've been able to amass like volumes either on the merchant
yeah,
side or the consumer side, and been able to build a money churner out of that. So, for example, even if you look at Facebook's business
yeah,
in India or any of these social media platforms, India really is that Dow farm, right? It's where you get that
yeah,
volume from. But if you
yeah,
look at ARPUs of an Indian user, it's abysmal compared to the American or European counterparts. And I
yeah,
think I think Zomato also is a great case in point of having a very specific use case, not
mm,
going after anyone and everyone, being really
yeah,
focused about what's the job to be done, and then just crushing it in terms of execution. So
mm.
one big takeaway for me was,
Focus.
if you're focus and more users, more problems, man. Like
Yeah,
it's impossible to find a scalable enough lowest common denominator in 125 million users. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
what is even the thing that unites them beyond a point,
yeah.
which you can create multiples of. What about you? What's you mentioned profit. What else? Like what can we take away from this?
I also, if I just kind of compare Nika with Paytm for me, the big difference has been that I'm looking at a business, and I think most times we feel that we need to add more things into the mix, have more pipelines of revenue to become really large. Sometimes you can actually stick to one lane and add things in that lane, and you can become really large because it gives you one thing, right? Like, earlier we spoke about the fact that you can build that moat around in many ways, if you can have a set of things that work across all the businesses and they play off each other, because I think the problem with Paytm is you don't know how things play off each other, as well as from a narrative standpoint and from like how it's structured standpoint as well. Whereas with Nika, anything they've added on makes total sense, and which is why I'm interested to see how, like, for instance, fashion kind of scales up, or how, like, like even if I look at like a Mintra trying to get into the whole personal care space because they realize they haven't been able to bring that in and they're kind
They
of
miss the
pushing
boat.
towards that direction. It's
Yeah.
going to be interesting. I think that's going to be the battle. It's going to be a Mintra versus Nika battle, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm, I'm trying to see how that will kind of scale up.
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's Mintra versus Nykaa anymore. But I do think that I mean there isn't no criticism for Nykaa, right?
Mm.
So for example, one
Yeah,
big
yeah,
criticism for Nykaa is that anywhere in between 20 to about 40% of their revenue comes from their top five brands,
mm.
right? So there's a lot of dependency on few brands to really drive the kind of volume that you needed to. Even in fashion, what fashion is unfortunately a very brand led category. So what's really going to be your moat over there? Will it be the same strategy as beauty, where you bring the Huda Beauty equivalent in fashion of the world to the Indian
Yeah,
customer and just use access as your moat, right? Because Mintra's got that nice cycle of Levi's at 50% off, Nike at 600% off, etc., going for it. So I think what will be interesting to see is two things: is their retail bet give them the kind
mm.
of outcome that they really needed to, because retail seems to obviously be a big area of focus for
Yeah,
them. And I think the other thing that Nika's done a good job of, which let's see what way it goes, is their investment in their own brands, right? Like even within fashion, they've launched their own private labels. In beauty, they
yeah,
acquired Dot and Key. So even they're doing a little bit of like the buy versus build, and
yeah,
seeing how that whole sort of narrative comes together.
yeah.
But it's not like Nika doesn't have criticism either.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm just trying to figure because it's almost like Mintra has one territory and Nykaa has always had one turf. Now they're both trying to, because Mintra kind of has owned one entire part of that, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm interested. I'm a bit of a sucker for anything where I'm saying, okay, it's going to be like a competition. Let's see who battles it out. Um,
No,
uh,
it's going to heat up, and it's not just Nykaa and Myntra. It's Nykaa and Purple, right? It's
yeah,
Nykaa and
yeah. Purple scaled out a
potentially,
lot. Yeah,
yeah, Purple scaled up incredibly. They just raised $130 million, which
yeah,
was, I think, announced a couple of days ago.
yeah.
It's even, for example, I mean, let's see what way MyGlam goes, but even MyGlam
Mm.
could be a formidable
MyGlam's
something
going to be the
in
big one.
the
It's going to be interesting to see.
in in the grander scheme of things. But I think I definitely, one thing that I absolutely love, which I want to end at least my contribution to this segment with, is just how Falguni Nair has broken so many rules. It is just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
She's broken the rule of like, you're too
Age.
old, you can't do this.
Yeah.
She's broken the rule of like, doesn't understand technology, she can't do this. She's broken the rule of like, a female with only finance background, you can't do this. She's also broken the rule of building a business for, it to become a family business of sorts, right? She's got
Yeah.
her kids involved, who are all leading different verticals, which again is very different from how, of course, VSS has his brother involved, but
Yeah.
it's very different from how you typically see, startups representing themselves. So I think just like the number of rules that have been broken is just
Yeah.
incredible. And shout out to her,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. And I think it's also, in many ways, it brings us back to what has predominantly been a large part of the Indian business story, which has been family businesses. There is nothing wrong with a family business. The problem is that if you look at families and how they run their businesses, the ones who do it well know which people have the capability and which roles they're good at and how they build verticals and who aren't, and they do well. So in some ways, maybe it's a bit of a throwback to the fact that you don't have to take away everything from the old world to do the new world. There are some things you take from there, I guess. But again, I totally agree. Like super inspirational, just like she's broken all those, like every single piece which you can't do, you can't do. And also, if you're a solid business person, you can build a great business. I think that's the whole thing. It doesn't age, everything else doesn't really matter. Everything else kind of comes
I
later.
concur. I concur. No, but good on both of them, man.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is great for our country and just generally for the ecosystem. And
Yeah.
here's hoping Paytm story pans out in the best way possible
Yes.
for them and their
Yes.
shareholders. And of course, Nika delivers on the giant valuation that has been anointed on them.
Yes. And so, what are we closing with? We're closing with are we doing recommendations? What are we doing? I have actually forgotten how we plan to end the
We
show.
end with our recommendations. So, dear listeners, every single week, Varun and I will give you like our favorite finds, whether it's, a book that we read or a podcast that we
Yeah.
read or like a
Yeah.
chocolate that we had or whatever.
Yes.
So, Varun, what are
Yes.
your recommendations for this week, man? What have you been up to?
I'm actually going to recommend a channel which has literally taught me, I would say, 50% of what I know about the creator economy. It's a YouTube channel called Colin and Samir. I watch every video they put out. They have actually, so I was very confused by the metaverse, also because I found that presentation interesting and bizarre and interesting in a bizarre way. But they made a video about understanding the metaverse, understanding NFTs. And the interesting part about these two guys is they were two YouTubers making content about the sport of lacrosse years ago,
Mhm.
sold that YouTube channel to to another YouTube network, and they started making content. At some point, about a year, I think a year ago, is when they started getting a lot more into just talking about the creator economy. So they talk to creators, they talk about stuff that's happening in it. I learned so much about the space just by watching them. So shout out to Colin and Samir, like literally, like watch that channel if you want to understand. And even though it's global, Sejal Kumar's been on the podcast though when she was in the US, but it teaches you where things are going to go from an Indian sense. So Colin and Samir, like total high level recommendation.
I am going to take you up on that recommendation because I've been also trying to, get a sense of the creative space because there's so much that's said but yet left unsaid. So,
Yeah.
sounds awesome, man. I will give a counter recommendation to yours,
Mm.
which is
Mm.
The Dropout. So I have literally been like stalking this Theranos Elizabeth Holmes case because I just find it so totally redonkulous and
Yeah.
absurd. And
Yeah.
just the fucking cards that are being played at this point is, yeah.
Yes.
But basically, The Dropout is this really cool podcast that's hosted by a journalist, Rebecca Jarvis, and she does this really
Mm.
really good job of capturing all parts of the Theranos testimony and that's and essentially like the rulings that have been going on. She documents everything in weekly episodes, and it's also really cool because she brings in parts of like this whole Theranos ecosystem, everyone from their employees to a journalist who wrote about them to whistleblowers from within the ecosystem of Theranos. But a really, really, really fun podcast to listen to. It's just, yeah, it's mind blowing to see the amount of like things that have been pulled off by this lady.
I want to also end off with, I think we should both give two random, it should be two random things. Each of us needs to have one random thing at the end of every episode. This will be, even though our amazing producer has been telling us we've taken this episode way too long, but I want one random fact about something that you realized or something you read on the internet around this, around anything this week.
One random
Random thing,
fact. Okay,
which people
you
can
go,
bring up in a
given that you have
conversation and
come
say,
up
oh,
with
wow,
this.
I learned this today,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is so
tell away.
random.
Haven't we taught our listeners so many things, guys? Come on, all my
That's
research. There's like 8 pages of research over
fine.
here.
This is just me realizing we didn't speak about the Spider-Man trailer, so I just want to speak about the
Oh,
Spider-Man
God.
trailer for a couple of minutes. So, no, one second. We're talking about the metaverse. The multiverse is coming. Okay, the multiverse is coming to Marvel. The Spider-Man movie has a ton of stuff happening in it, but the trailer, interesting. So it's been rumored for a long time that obviously we've had three Spider-Mans over time. It's been long rumored that you'll have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield both kind of come into this movie. And because
Andrew
when the
Garfield was
multiverse
the
breaks, you'll have
worst
multiple
Spider-Man.
dimensions coming in, right? They're going
Uh-huh.
to come in because already the villains from all the other multiverses are in the trailer. So there is one shot, and this is the beauty of the internet. This is what I love about it. There is one shot where you see a couple of the supervillains coming towards this one Spider-Man, and people have gone frame by frame, and you realize at one point that I think it's is it Sandman? I think I haven't figured which one of those it was. I think it's Electro. When Electro's kind of going towards it, his face. Oh no, it's a lizard. Sorry. His face kind of goes sideways like
This
someone's
story better
punched
get
him, but there's no
interesting,
one
Varun.
there.
Come on.
There's nobody there. So, which means in VFX for the trailer, they have taken off the other Spider Man who is there, which means that you will see all three Spider Men in the multiverse, in Spider Man and the Multiverse of Madness. No. What is it called?
Listeners, I am
Homecoming.
I
I
am
forgot what the name is.
yawning right now. I really do
Okay,
not
fine. This is
care
how it
about
goes into
Spider-Man.
randomness. But our producer
But
Vora has said
wait
yay in
one second,
chat,
one
so he's
second.
excited.
There is one more random fact which actually our producer, Vora, what are you? Producer? Just cool
Yes, he's
guy.
producer. Yeah,
Okay,
Spider-Man
he's
No Way
producer.
Home. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, amazing.
What
So,
is he
so
said?
basically, Vora gave us this like kick-ass random insight, which is obviously believable that this shit would happen. But
Mm,
NordPass's annual global password survey is out, and
mm,
shockingly, or not
mm,
shockingly, password is India's
mm.
most common
Of
password.
course it is. I thought it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How
And
everybody I know of a certain category has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 somewhere as a password. I
but
don't have it.
turns out in the Indian context, it is password. I'm happy to report my password is not password,
My
guys.
password is
I
not
I'm
password.
I'm I'm not one of
I have
these.
some really
Varun,
lame
that's a lie.
passwords, but my password is not password.
Oh, what is your password?
I'm
My
not telling you
lenses
my
don't fit
password.
my eyes.
I think the reason why people have really bad passwords is because if you work in corporate environments, IT makes you change the password every 2 weeks. I
Yup,
I can't
yup.
remember what my password is because IT makes me change it all the time. But so keep it password, people.
Listeners,
It's fine.
listeners, in case there's any of you hackathoners out there, in case you want to help Varun remember his password, knock yourself out, guys. Knock
No,
yourselves out.
I write them down in my head.
Calling for
They're
trouble.
all there. Yes, this
Calling
is
for
us
trouble.
like
Okay,
not
guys.
stopping this episode. I think it's time to stop this. We were not
Yes,
fast, but we
we will
thought a
stop
lot. We gave you
talking.
lots to think about. Um,
Yes.
where can people find you online, Suchita? What are you at online?
They can find me on at Suchita Salwan on Twitter or Instagram by literally the same thing. Majig, VD, what about you?
I'm at the rate Varun Dugi on all social platforms. And we should actually make an email ID for people to write in. I think we should figure a way for people to write in to us and just say if this is something they want us to talk about. We can maybe talk about that. I think by the next episode we'll make the email ID and talk about it, or we'll drop it in the show
Yes.
notes. If we have made it by the time this episode goes live, we'll drop it in the show notes. If we haven't, then you will see it in episode 2, which is every
Or just
Monday
tweet at
is
us,
when it
guys.
drops. Just
Yes,
tweet at
tweet
us.
at
Yes.
us. Yeah, tell us
Tweet at
what
us.
you want us to talk about. What are the random things you want us to discuss? Any like facts
Yes.
that you want me to nerd out on and prepare copious notes for you? I am your slave, my friends.
And
Knock
just to
yourselves
show
out.
that we are recording this at night because I'm going off to Goa in the
Oh
morning.
my
I am
God,
taking
you
a photograph which
lucky.
I will post online.
Yes, and you can send me the picture too, which I can also post. Guys, Varun is
Yes, I will.
perpetually on leave. I have realized he's either in the Maldives or
I
he's in
take breaks.
Goa
I've,
or
I've realized the beauty of breaks, and I'm going to take that. And we're going to keep talking like this randomly until at some point somebody stops recording this podcast. So till then, think fast. Send us random stuff to talk
enjoy.
about, and tell
Yes.
us what you like or don't like about the show. It's important. We want to learn. We might not
You
listen,
like
but
my
we'll
joke,
learn.
guys. Premature
Yes,
ejaculation. With that,
ejaculation. That is the joke of the
bye.
episode.
Bye. Bye, guys.
IVM.